Welcome to Myco Minute, conversations about collaboration brought to you by the capacity creators at Myco Consulting, LLC, where we help higher ed, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders advance the initiatives they care about most.
Welcome to Myco Minute, conversations about collaboration, brought to you by the capacity creators at Myco Consulting, LLC. I'm your host, Deb Mashik, and today I'm talking with Karith Foster, speaker, humorist, and author. From the airwaves to organizations, from universities to corporations, Karith has created a seismic shift in mindsets by addressing issues of free expression, diversity, and inclusion. Karith, one of the things that I deeply admire about you is not just your willingness, but also your ability to go into what I consider places of tension. So whether it's between, this relationship between free speech and diversity, or in your most recent book, the relationship between perfectionism and happiness, you go in and you do it with grace and humor and authenticity. And I'm curious kind of how, where, or why that incredible gift developed.
Well, thank you, firstly, for an amazing compliment. This has been a process. This has been a journey. I wish I could say I popped out this, together. But I'm still, it's still a process and a journey, and I'm learning as I go along. But I've had such incredible life experiences, and I think I'm an observer of people and of situations. And, I always want to get something out of a situation. Like I like to experience things. I think things should be an experience. And I not only use that in the work that I do, but I appreciate when I have them myself, because what I've learned over the years is there's so many great lessons in the experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly. And to be able to pass those lessons on, to be a conduit of the learning, of the love, and of the grace. I love that you use the word grace. That's one of my favorite words.
Such a good word.
It is. It is. And we need more of it. So it's not like I took this magic pill. It was, a series of triumphs and tragedies. But I always had this passion to be a beacon of light and truth. I always wanted to just make the world a better place. And I've been able to do that through different aspects of where my career has been, whether it was, as a stand-up comedian, bringing people together.
I was going to say, so for listeners who may not know about your fascinating history, can you give a little texture to that sense of experiencing and learning and pulling it forward for others?
Sure. Early on, like I said, I just had this drive to be this beacon of light and truth. Those were the words that really drove me. And so I thought, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to be the next Oprah and Connie Chung. And because those women know what's going on, and they're out there disseminating the information, and they're telling the world what's real and what's happening. And then I got into the media. My first job out of school was a big job. I worked for a small ABC affiliate, but then I moved to New York to work for The View, because I thought, who better than Barbara Walters to be my boss, right? The queen. And the more I saw, the more I realized that the goals I had weren't really aligning with how the industry was working. So I jokingly say I'm a recovering journalist, but there are no accidents. And while I was there, I found stand-up comedy, or rather it found me. And it was that vehicle of being able to get on stage, tell my truth, be authentically me, not have any censors, not have anybody say, you can't say that. That really was like, wow, this is amazing and freeing. And it gives me the opportunity to bring people together and do it under the umbrella of humor and laughter and common sense.
So this is an interesting one. So you're up on stage being unedited, and I've heard you speak before about what it was like to be also totally accepted in that being unedited. There's something important there for me about the relationship between authenticity and connection.
I call the world of stand-up comedy, we're like the island of misfit toys. people who go into comedy, none of us are normal. Not that anybody's really normal, but especially comedians. Like, nobody normal gets in front of complete strangers and in the most vulnerable art form ever and tries to make them laugh. Like, that's not normal. But the reward is that you gain this sense of self, right? Like, this affirmation of when you have a crowd laughing with you, basically agreeing that what you think is funny, they find funny too. It's really, it's a drug. I mean, it's a high like no other. I've never really experimented with drugs, but I can't imagine a greater high than having an audience like rolling, laughing in the same beat that you are in. And it's powerful. It's powerful.
Connect that for me to your work in diversity.
Absolutely. Well, I use humor in my diversity work because I think, it's when you get people to laugh, you can help them get to a neutral space, right? And usually talking about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's pretty taboo. Still, it's a very sensitive topic because everybody's coming from their own experiences and everybody has experienced diversity training in some form or fashion in a different way. My issue with how it's traditionally been done is that it seems to cause more division and polarization. And we either victimize people or re-victimize them or vilify them. And to me, that's just the complete opposite of how we're supposed to be going about this. Like, I can't believe that for almost 70 years now, we've been doing it this way. And it seems so simple. Like, why don't we flip the switch? Why don't we, instead of focusing on what separates and divides us, focus on what we have in common, how we can be truly inclusive of one another, but most importantly, how we can be introspective, meaning understanding your value, your worth, your connection to humanity. Because when you can see those things in yourself, that's when you can see them in someone else. And that's the basis of inversity. It's still a nod.
I've heard you say we've got to take the division out of diversity. And I'm even looking at your backdrop. So inversity is that notion of including and what unites us as opposed to what divides us.
Yeah. And it's still acknowledging, our histories, our experiences, the unique qualities and things that make all of us up. So it's not saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter that you're this, or this, or you're in this category, or you're this religion, or you love this type of person, or you're only disabled with your body. No. It's not saying that. It's not pushing that to the side. But what it is saying is we are more than those things. We are more than those labels. And I think we're doing ourselves a grave disservice to only, be recognized and recognize ourselves as one or two things. We are not monoliths. And I think, we've been conditioned, quite honestly, to fall into a trap of how do you identify? And now we're almost forcing other people to do that too. And I think it's a shame.
So I, as you know, love talking about collaboration, and it's something I study and think a lot about. And I'm curious, with that framework of diversity, what role do others play in realizing the potential and promise of diversity there? So there's, in your work, this really clear message of the individual has worth independent of their categories or their group memberships. But it's also, there's something very holistic about we're all coming together to be in the space together and to do something together. So that I'm curious if you could just riff for a minute on the relationship between the way you approach diversity, equity, and inclusion work and collaboration.
Absolutely. I think it really boils down to a day for me, a day that happened in 2001, September 13th. The day after 2011, 2 days after 2011, that was a Tuesday, as we remember. I was in New York City. I walked home from work that day. That Wednesday, like everybody else, you just sat stunned watching the television kind of hold up, just waiting to see what and if anything else is going to happen next. And that Thursday, I braved the streets of Manhattan with several friends, and we went to the Jacob Javits Center, and we went to volunteer. We didn't know what we were going to do, if there was anything to do, but we wanted to do something. And what I saw was probably one of the most beautiful things I have ever witnessed in my life. And it still chokes me up, but it was thousands upon thousands of New Yorkers there with tools and sandwiches and water and first aid equipment, and like for blocks, people for blocks lined up just to help their fellow human being. And at that moment, and for like 2 weeks after, there was no color, there was no religion, there was no gender or age or sexuality or political affiliation. It was human beings there to help human beings. So I witnessed firsthand what we are capable of. Now, should it take a natural disaster or a national tragedy to get us to that place? Of course not. But what it takes is a willingness and an openness and an ability to have an elevated consciousness, right? About how we actually really are connected to one another on a much deeper level than we've ever thought about.
Karith, I know you're passionate about well-being and thriving, and in fact, it's at the heart of your newest book, titled, I got the title here in front of me, You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy, How to Let Go, Worry Less, and Get a Life. I'm curious what we can learn about living, working, and thriving with others from the vantage point of your research and thinking about happiness.
Well, this book was a passion project, and it was made from love, to be received with love. And it's funny, love is a word that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used unabashedly. And I don't know why we're so afraid to use that word now, because it's not romantic love. It's not the passionate love. It's the love for, again, our fellow human beings, but also for each other, for ourselves. And this book came about because I realized how much of my time I'd spent trying to be this perfect person from the time I was a child, trying to be a perfect daughter, a perfect friend, a perfect student. And that graduated to being a perfect intern and a perfect employee, and now, sometimes a perfect boss. And what I realized, what that cost me. And it cost me time, it cost me energy, it certainly cost money, but it also cost me joy and happiness. And I realized I wasn't the only person who was probably living in that space. And the tie-in to adversity with Perfect or Happy is, we are so busy sometimes looking at our imperfections, right? Not understanding our value, right? Or our worth, that we get caught up in this horrible downward spiral. So we aren't living our best lives. We're not attaining the goals that we wish to attain. We're not giving our best selves to the rest of the world. And it's the law of physics, it's an equal reaction that happens when what we do to ourselves, we do outwardly as well. So when we're just focused on our imperfection, we're focused on other people's imperfections too. And when you do that, how can you possibly value them or relate to them? You're just looking at somebody for being different, and that's not perfect in your eyes. So then they're not somebody that you are either willing to listen to or work with or engage with. And that's a huge misstep.
So I know you spend a lot of time on campuses and in conversations with corporate and nonprofit leaders. And I'm curious if you had a single piece of advice that you could give them about how to improve the world or how to really rock at this role that they are in, what would it be?
I'm going to answer that in the shortest version I've ever delivered of this keynote that I created, called the ABCs of 2020 Leadership. And the A is ask. Ask for help. Ask for other people's input. Ask for their opinions. You're not expected as a leader to have all of the answers. You're expected to be a listener. You're expected to be someone, yes, who takes charge, but who also is open to the input of others. And if you don't have everything that you need right then and there, you ask, because guess what? You don't get what you don't ask for.
Mm-hmm.
And people who ask for things are actually braver than people who don't. And that's what I think real leaders are. The B in the ABCs of leadership is be kind. Don't forget to be kind. You know, we're not all, again, coming from the same place. And that kindness should extend not just to, you know, outwardly, but inwardly. Be kind to yourself. What good comes of beating yourself up? What good comes of negative, you know, thoughts and energy? It just, again, it begets itself. And then the C is choose community over clicks. And I know that it's really easy to want to, you know, birds of a feather flock together. It's not just a rhyme, you know, and because it's cute. It's and we, you know, we tend to have this magnetism toward people who think like us, who look like us, who behave like us. But you know, that's forming a clique. You really, if you want to be a strong leader, you need to form a community, and that means including people who may not think exactly the same way you do, or be on the same page necessarily, but you still respectfully engage and listen and share.
I love that. This notion of opening up and welcoming in. So asking, being kind, and connecting and preferencing community over clicks. I like your ABCs, Karith.
Thank you.